I thought I'd do another video on ITF style quirks because I went back and looked at some of the ITF pattern videos, and there are a few more points that I didn't get to in my previous video, so I thought I'd put them in this one here. One of the things that really bugs me about watching the ITF patterns is when they do the key up being a yell, when they do the key up at the end of the pattern, they say the name of the pattern instead of actually doing a key up, which is ridiculous because the entire purpose of a key up is you're making that yell, that shout. It's generating power. It's meant to scare and intimidate your opponent. It's meant to focus you on what you're doing. And this idea of, when you get to the end of the pattern and you make that type key up at the end, it's just a yell. It's a shout. It's not, you don't say the name of the pattern. You don't say Won Hyo or Chun Ji at the end of the pattern. It makes no sense. So, once again, that is a quirk that you see with the ITF, with schools that are part of the ITF, that belong to that organization. They do them that way, and they finish the patterns off that way, and it's, to somebody that does not follow that philosophy, it looks ridiculous. Another thing with ITF patterns that drives me crazy is when you watch them doing something like a reverse roundhouse kick, for instance. So they're coming around with their leg and they're about to do a reverse roundhouse kick. Instead of actually following through and kicking through the target with the kick and then bringing the leg down, you'll see they do these slow reverse roundhouse kicks, and they stop the kick about 45 degrees short of where the actual target is and then drop their leg down. So it looks like they're kicking this lame, weak, straight leg kick or whatever, where instead of coming out and putting any kind of snap on it, they're just kind of sticking their leg out there and then stopping it and dropping their leg down. It looks really, really terrible. And when you're doing a reverse roundhouse kick, that is not how you do a reverse roundhouse kick. If your target is here, you kick with a reverse roundhouse kick through the target, and then you put your leg down. You don't stop your reverse roundhouse kick here and then put your leg back down on the ground. Makes no sense, but that's how they do it in their patterns, and we don't do it that way. So again, when you watch my patterns at my school, again, the way that I learned it from a school that predates the ITF is you kick through with your reverse roundhouse kick. You don't stop prior to the target and drop your leg. Just another one of those silly things. What was another one? Punching and doing a side kick in the same direction. This, again, is something that you see with ITF certified schools, people that are following that philosophy specifically. And like I said before, we do the ITF patterns, but we don't do them exactly the way that they're doing them, and for very good reason. Here's another example. Whenever you see a side kick in one of the patterns, you will see the person kick out with their leg, and then they will also put their hand out and punch like this in the same direction, so that they're kicking with their leg out this way, and then they're also holding their hand out like this, punching in the same direction that they're kicking. At no point would you ever do that when you are throwing a side kick. So when you practice foundation movements in class, when you're practicing a side kick on a heavy bag, or when you're doing board breaking, anytime you're doing a side kick, you would never punch in the same direction that you were performing the side kick. And there's a very good reason for that. You need the counter action that you get when you do a side kick. You actually need to punch or make it look like you are punching in the opposite direction. So if I want to kick this way, I actually have to bring my leg up, kick in that direction, and punch in the opposite direction simultaneously. It's like a counterbalance. You need to make that motion to almost as, you're not really punching in the other direction, but it looks as though you are throwing a punch in the opposite direction as you kick that way. And if you watch students when they do a proper side kick, that's exactly what they're doing. You have to lower your body down. You have to almost, you roll your shoulder, you make that motion as though you're throwing a punch in the opposite direction in order to kick that way. That is how you throw a proper side kick. And if you're watching the ITF patterns, again, for schools that are members of the ITF that do their patterns and follow that guideline strictly, like they follow it to the letter, they don't do their patterns like that. You see them doing kicks, side kick and punch in the same direction, and if you do that, it will take all of the power out of your side kick. So you would never do that in practice, and as a result, we don't do it in our patterns. It absolutely destroys the side kick when you do it that way. So again, certain style quirks, you've probably noticed by now with the key ups, how we do it in our patterns, how they do it. You've probably noticed with, like I said, the side kick, the punch, the reverse roundhouse kicks where they're stopping well short of the target on their reverse roundhouse kicks. It just looks silly. We don't do things like that, and there's a very good reason for it. So oftentimes, I will get people telling me that, I'm doing the patterns wrong, or somebody wants to comment on the patterns. First of all, the way I'm doing them is exactly the way that I was taught to do them. The school that I learned it from was a school that came before the ITF. So if anybody is doing it incorrectly, it's the ITF that's doing it incorrectly because they came later. And of course the ITF and the WTF have split off. The ITF has actually split a couple of times. So what you're really looking at is a power grab between people who want to collect checks from martial arts schools for people to belong to their organization, but who don't actually teach classes or do anything in the martial arts. They're just there to collect money. It's all about power. It's all about, ranking and, philosophical arguments and political bickering and stuff like that. That's really all that goes on behind the scenes. Most martial arts students are never exposed to any of that kind of nonsense and simply don't care, nor should you. But it does get on my nerves when people tell me that, I'm doing the patterns incorrectly or something. No, I'm not doing them incorrectly. I'm doing them exactly the way that they're supposed to be done and doing the techniques the way they're supposed to be done. And, if you want to subscribe to ITF style and do it that way, more power to you, you're welcome to, but I think you'll see after doing the patterns for a little while, I think you'll see and you'll probably agree that the way that we do the patterns at my school, the way that I was always taught, I think you'll find it makes for just a better pattern all around, and you'll probably start to find many of those ITF quirks ridiculous like I do. So over time, and then maybe it gives you a different perspective anyway. So I hope that helps, because I know I missed several of those in my previous video. I was going to get to them eventually. I figured I'd do it now. So anyway, till next time. Thanks.